So I feel like everyone's got a bunch of definitions for this. So as per my cosmology, I have awareness defined as the capacity to hold or view information. There's potential for infinite realities. It's extremely basic and a non-representational field. Maybe, I mean, I have sphere points to represent, but consciousness is interiority that awareness can have. It's subjective experience, the qualitative field. Self-awareness is consciousness's capacity to form understanding of its own states, which creates an ability to self-model and self-reflect. So it goes from awareness being fundamental to self-awareness as emergent, and consciousness being sort of like that bridge in between. Today, we're just going to focus on awareness and consciousness. If you haven't already been following along, my name is Shivani Upadhyay. I'm the founder of Shivoham Labs, and I have released a 44-page cosmology framework that covers the infinite nature of reality and infinite 3D universe models that we exist within. In my previous video, I talked about how there was an MIT paper that coincided with a lot of my cosmology, but I wasn't totally satisfied with the way I was describing colliding bubble universes. So I want you to take a look at this diagram, okay? And notice that for these two bubbles, the center of these spheres is this dark red color. And the reason I actually have the background being this dark red color is to indicate that those infinite points that are infinitely close, infinitely dense, like nested, and infinitely filling up take up so much space that it doesn't just look like scattered dots, but it's like a solid block color. So there's infinite sphere points in the background in between all around these two bubble universes. Now, what's the difference between this and this? So we see that these things here are sphere points. The reason I'm coming back to this topic is because I wondered how collision could take place of two things being apart when at the surface area of a sphere, there's infinite points, which then could become their own spheres that have their own surface area with their own, and it goes on and goes on. And that can go on for this bubble universe and that one as well. And all these realities here exist. So how is there space in between? Why would they collide as if there was nothing in between them until the moment their boundaries touch? This is a great place to bring up the difference between awareness versus consciousness. So if all of these infinite realities are literally, materially happening all at once, everywhere, then there's no thing for experience to experience itself through. There's no dynamism, there's no movement. And the word movement itself is interesting too, because I'm thinking steps. The word steps is interesting because there's more than one. So there's an order to the consecutive order of steps. And there's like a pause where step one is done, the movement in between, and then the next step that happens, which makes this process both discrete and continuous because awareness is having this experiential frame rate. So awareness is all of those infinite sphere points existing, just not being realized. And in the second diagram, I'm describing awareness if it was moving through the space in between and focusing on a sphere point, then that point would expand into a sphere, and that's why I call them sphere points. This made me draw the connection of awareness as potentiality and everything existing everywhere all at once, just not materially realized. Now, remember, my cosmology is meant to serve as a skeletal structure for everything that exists in this universe. This is what happens when you try to look for the same something in everything rather than trying to create a theory of everything. Consciousness is path traversal. Think about it. Those steps, that movement, experience, consciousness is having that interiority, the qualitative field. So that can't happen if everything's existing all at once. You have to be able to step through these different realities to experience them. Now check it out. I think we can collapse subject-object duality because awareness, I'm talking about like one vantage point moving through. But the thing is, awareness is everywhere. It's infinitely omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. So as awareness moves, and like in this diagram, these points are being realized to be spheres, their own universes and realities, while also those things themselves being awareness, those things themselves holding latent selfhood, and they're also expanding. So it's a matter of maybe asking ourselves, did we actually discover a new reality, or was it always there and we just became aware of it? And that thing too also becomes aware at the same time. Perhaps you could even say something like the level to which a point expands into a sphere is directly proportional to how much awareness fixates on it. Here's another example of what path traversal can look like. So if you notice, there's 360 degrees of freedom, I guess, from the main sphere. And so you can choose any directional vector from those 360 degrees. That's what the magenta colored arrow is. And if you notice, there's, that vector, but it also stops at a certain point. You don't literally see the point because now you're seeing another sphere. So what consciousness would be doing is traversing through any skeletal reality structure. This one probably has some type of material skin to it because it's able to move through an experience. So it's experiencing something. It takes a step, there's a point that gets realized as a sphere, and there's another 360 degrees you can move within that sphere. And so even if you rotate your phone, you can kind of see that the directions the arrows are going in within these spheres, the spheres themselves are rotated to indicate like a deeper and newer reality. So it's very similar to this previous diagram I was showing over here, except it's showing what it would look like to actually bubble up into new realities. Not just that, but for all of these lines, if we remember when I was talking about zooming in my previous videos, so when you take a 0D point and you're going to a 1D line, and the line is like longer than what your scale of view is, then you might be looking at this line like it's a vector from left to right. Okay, that's what your head has decided to do. So if it's going in this arrow, for it to even go in that arrow rather than this arrow or this arrow, there was a direction from within that point. How did that happen? When you zoom into the point, you see that it's a circle. Circle has a radius, which is a 1D line. And so I'm saying that within that dot, zooming in, there's a circle, and there's a vector already in there choosing a point on the circumference from its center with its radius and being in that same direction. So this actually keeps going on. You can keep zooming, and here's another diagram where I've essentially, this is representing nested directionality. So I've essentially just exaggerated the centers of these circles so that they look like concentric circles, but they're all meant to be the center, just blown up. But this is happening at an infinite level. So when we go back to this diagram and we're looking at path traversal, this is happening, but also this is happening. You can even have a little bit of fun with this, because if there's nested directionality and it's happening at these infinite scales, I mean, maybe that indicates some level of greater weight to this vector. Maybe it represents a level of focus. And I know that I'm also still applying all of these human understandings of what a graph would look like and traversing through a graph and what the implications are. But I feel like that can help us really tie together why awareness is just potentiality. It is everything happening all at once as a structure, but it's waiting on consciousness to realize that structure into something material, from immaterial to material. Infinity is consistently hauntingly beautiful.